Hey, what's going on, everyone? It's Josh Guerrero here, and welcome to the All Around Adventure podcast. Whether you're joining me for the first time or if you've been listening to the podcast for a while now, I certainly do want to welcome you here. And as always, I want to thank you for being here today. I know you're busy. I know you got a lot going on, and there's also so much out there on the internet these days that's trying to get your attention and distract you. It just means the world to me that you've chosen to download and listen to this podcast. Now, if you are in fact new to this podcast and you're not entirely sure what we're all about here, this is the show where you hear amazing tales from afar and get the all-important life lessons that go along with them. And that'll be travel stories from myself, as well as the fantastic guests that I welcome on this podcast. And I'm talking with travelers of all kinds on this podcast. I'm talking with warriors, entrepreneurs, digital nomads, best-selling authors, bloggers, adventurers, philanthropists, you name it. If they have a fantastic travel story to tell with some great life lessons to share, it's my job to seek them out and bring them on this podcast and extract their stories and life lessons through powerful conversations to help you level up in your life. Now, today's episode is going to be a little bit different. You have me today, and this is Travel Reflections, which I just talk about some of my travel experiences that I've had along the way and kind of just share some of those stories with you and try to extrapolate some of my own life lessons that I have to share with you all. And that's what I'm going to be diving into today. Now, the last couple of months has been pretty interesting for me for the most part. You know, there's been a lot of interesting days that have popped up. We had the Marine Corps birthday on November 10th. You know, some of you might have heard me say in the past, if you listened to the podcast for a while, that I am a former U.S. Marine. And then following the Marine Corps birthday was Veterans Day, which is a day that means a lot to me as well. And then, of course, we rolled into Thanksgiving, and my birthday was last week. So definitely a lot going on the last couple of months. Now, I've been kind of thinking about some of those days and reflecting on some instances from certain moments in my life and just kind of seeing what I can share with you all, what I think would be something that would be beneficial and valuable to you all. And so I decided to talk about a story with you all today from my time in the Marine Corps. And I remember I'd shared this same particular story with my friend Paul Harrison when I was a guest on his podcast, the Profane Humanities podcast. Which, if you haven't heard me on that show yet, I definitely recommend you go check out that episode and check out his podcast as well. I'll leave a link to that in the show notes for this episode. But I told him a little bit about my time in the Marine Corps, and I shared this one particular story that I feel is pretty relevant to with what's happening right now. It's something that I've been reflecting on that's been beneficial to me, and I hope that the lessons from it will be beneficial to you all as well. Not really going to be too much of a practical application type episode. It's going to be more of a philosophical wisdom type episode, but I hope you find it valuable nonetheless. So this is how the story goes. So when I first started off in the Marine Corps, I had to go to boot camp first. That's basically how any branch of the military would work. You have to go through basic training just to make yourself competent to do the basic aspects of your job, of being in the military. And for the Marine Corps, basic training was 12 weeks long, and it was pretty much hell on earth for the most part. You probably might have seen some video footage of Marine Corps drill instructors just screaming in the faces of the recruits. And then you see them having to go through obstacle courses and do drill and all kinds of sort of thing, rolling around in the mud and so on and so forth. But there was a particular moment in boot camp called the Crucible. And depending on where you go for basic training, there's two different areas in which the Marine Corps conducts basic training. They have Parris Island in South Carolina, and they have San Diego in California. I ended up going to San Diego. Now, the Crucible, as I've mentioned, is a 54-hour field training. I'll call it an exercise, more or less a trial by fire, I think would be more appropriate. In South Carolina, they do it as the very last thing that the recruits have to do. And then by the time that they completed the Crucible, that signifies the end of basic training, and they earn the title of United States Marine. Over in San Diego, it's a little bit different. The Crucible happens towards the end of about the second month of being there. So, and this is when the time I was no longer in San Diego, I was in Camp Pendleton, so just a little ways down the road. And so during this exercise, it's 54 hours long. We are hiking with our full rucksacks for many miles, doing a lot of different types of exercises and team building drills, all of them very physically demanding. We had a couple of live fire drills thrown in there too. Very little sleep. We were allowed maybe like 4 hours to sleep during the night. And I think, most of us would have been lucky if we were even able to get that much. So don't get a whole lot of food to go through there. We were given 3 MREs, meals ready to eat packets for the entire 54 hours, which, you're moving around so much, you're burning calories like it's nobody's business. But I remember there was one particular exercise during the Crucible that kind of stood out to me. And it's the story that I told Paul on his podcast, and it's the story that I'm going to tell you all now. And this particular moment stuck with me because of how excruciating it was. And what had happened is we were doing an exercise to simulate a medevac. If a Marine goes down on the battlefield and we had to carry him out of there to get him medevaced. And so what we did was we had a stretcher, and we would have one of the recruits who was going to play the wounded Marine. He was sitting on the stretcher, or rather laying on the stretcher, not sitting on it. And then 4 other recruits, one of myself included, had to try to carry him up this hill to a simulated helicopter LZ landing zone and to get him extracted out of there. And so I am in the front of the stretcher on the right side of it. So I had to hold it with my left hand because I just remembered I was so tired and that I barely had any strength. And trying to carry the stretcher was a very, very huge ordeal. It's like I felt like I couldn't grip it well enough. Like my hands were slippery. I can feel all the tiny micro tears going up and down my arm. I just felt so weak, and I just almost felt like I was just going to let go. But something happened in that moment, and I said something to myself. And I repeated this thing to myself over and over again, so that way I wouldn't let go. And that was, Josh, if you let go, he dies. So you better fucking hold on. And it was kind of just sort of that combat mindset where it's like I had to keep going. Because if I stopped, if I gave in to the pain and I quit, not only am I going to, compromise the life of this wounded Marine, but I can compromise the lives of everyone else around me too. So upon saying that to myself over and over again, we were able to make it to the top of this hill, to the simulated LZ, and get him extracted there. And, I guess and by the way that this exercise was set up, he would have lived. And and that was as a result because I didn't give up in that moment. I didn't succumb to the pain or to the weakness that I was feeling. I just kept on going. And that's something that kind of stuck with me because it's like I look back on that hard moment that I had faced in my life and kind of weigh it with like the hard moments that I'm facing in my life, either right now or other times along the way. And I said, what I'm facing right now, not that big a deal. I already dealt with that, so I think I got this. And the reason why I wanted to bring that story up with you today, talking about what happened during the Crucible, is, let's face it, 2020 has been pretty much a crucible for all of us. And for some people, the Crucible may be different. Sometimes depending on where you are or what it is you're going through or what, your own individual circumstances are, your Crucible may be different from mine, may be different from someone else's, but I think it's pretty safe to say that all of us are facing our own Crucible in some way, shape, or form. And I guess the reason why I didn't want to give anything like more tailor-made, like something more specific or practical this time around is because again, what I might be doing to deal with my own Crucible may or may not be entirely applicable to what you may be facing in your own Crucible. So I guess here's what I will say, though, in regards to that, is that whatever it is that you're facing, whatever that Crucible may look like for you, you have what it takes to keep on going, to push through, and to come out the other side stronger than you were before. And that's exactly what I faced on that day, trying to carry this fallen Marine up this hill. It's like I felt like I wanted to quit. I felt like I didn't have any more strength left. I felt like I was running on E, but I was able to push through and keep on going. And I realized that I was far more capable and I had far more potential within me than I had realized before. And another way I've heard this worded is something that David Goggins said in his book, Can't Hurt Me. He called this the 40% rule, is that once you reach that moment where you don't feel like you can go any farther, you've only reached 40% of your true potential. So that's something to keep in mind as you're going through the crucible that you're facing right now, in whatever facet that might be, is that once you think you can't go any further, you still have plenty more that you could bring forth to the surface and to keep on going. But that boils down to you being willing to make that decision to keep on pushing, forward. One of two things can happen when we're facing crucibles like we are right now. We can let it continue to take us through a downward spiral and just get us further down to the hole till we hit rock bottom. Or we could, face upward and we can climb. And we can claw our way through despite how hard it might be. And then we can make it to the top. And again, we'll be stronger and much more formidable than when we were before. And, between you and me, I think I'm going to go for the latter in that regard. So just remember what it is that you're capable of. Yes, 2020 has been a pretty shitty fucking year. There really is no disputing that. But, tough times, no matter where we are always gonna come, and we just got to be willing just to make it through, to push through despite the obstacles in our path, and just always remembering that we have what it takes to make it through. Because humans, we are pretty resilient animals. We can just look on like so many aspects throughout history, and then there's so many stories of just extraordinary, feats being done by people. So there's a lot that we're capable of. So let's give ourselves some credit there. All right. And I think that's all I have to say for now. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I just had a quick one for you all today. And I appreciate you tuning in. And I hope that this episode was valuable for you. If it was, please, and you want to hear more, please make sure you subscribe to the podcast wherever you might be listening to it. This is a weekly podcast. I got a brand new episode coming out every single Monday, so make sure you're subscribed. Also, if you did find this beneficial and you think it would be helpful to other people in your life, whether it be friends, family, whomever, please share this episode with them. And you can also help more people find this episode by heading over to Apple Podcasts and leaving us a 5-star rating and review. That helps with the algorithm, gets us trending higher, so that way more people can find this podcast. And then also we have a couple of other resources available for you besides this podcast over at All Around Adventure. And one of those is our private Facebook group called Travel Titans. It was a group that I had created for travelers to share their stories, their tips and advice, as well as their inspiration pertaining to both travel and self-development. And we certainly welcome you to join us. You can head over to facebook.com/groups/Travel Titans, and we look forward to seeing you there. And of course, the last thing that I want to share before I close out here, I just want to thank you very much for being here today. I want to thank you very much for supporting this podcast and the mission of All Around Adventure. I know there's a lot out there on the internet these days that's trying to vie for your attention and your time, but it just means so much to me that you've chosen to download and listen to this podcast, and I greatly appreciate it, and I certainly don't take it for granted. And that's all I have to say for now, and I'll be back next Monday with another fantastic episode featuring another great guest, so be sure to check back in. But until then, I'm Josh Guerrero saying be safe, happy travels, and always move forward.